One dangerous human ship entered the alien capital. No one dared to stop it. The alarm came at the 3rd hour of the alien night, when most of the capital city of Vol Prime was dark and quiet. Sensor Officer Trell Voss was the one who saw it first. He was tired, half asleep at his station, drinking cold tea and watching numbers scroll across his screen. Then one number changed, and his teacup fell out of his hand. A single ship had entered the outer sensor ring of the Caldrian Empire. It had come out of nowhere, no warning, no signal, no request for permission. One moment the space was empty. The next moment, there it was, sitting quietly in the dark like it had always belonged there. Trell checked the ship's transponder code twice, then a 3rd time, because he could not believe what he was seeing. The code was human. Not just human, but a military code, one that belonged to a very old and very feared class of ship. He pressed the alarm button so hard that he cracked the plastic cover. Within minutes, alarms were ringing across every level of Vol Prime's orbital defense station. Officers ran through hallways in their sleeping clothes, pulling on uniforms as they moved. Commanders were pulled out of their beds. Even the Grand Council, the highest government of the Caldrian Empire, was woken up in the middle of the night, which had not happened in over 40 years. The ship did not fire, it did not move fast, it did not try to hide. It simply floated there, calm and slow, and then it began to move toward the capital planet itself. "Confirm the reading," said Fleet Commander Dasik Orr, standing in the command center with his uniform half-buttoned. His eyes were still heavy with sleep, but his voice was sharp and awake now. "Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me it is a smuggler ship with a false code." "It is not a mistake, Commander," Trell said, his hands shaking slightly on the controls. "The ship matches known specifications for a human deep strike cruiser. Design class, Sable type. We have never seen one this close to the capital before." The room went silent. Everyone in that command center had grown up hearing stories about the Sable-class ships. During the last war between the humans and the Caldrian Empire, 3 Sable-class ships alone had ended an entire battle fleet of 200 Caldrian warships in less than 6 hours. The stories said the humans had not even lost a single life on their side that day. The Caldrian Empire had lost 12,000. That war had ended 23 years ago. Since then, there had been an uneasy peace. Humans stayed in their own territory. The Caldrian Empire stayed in its own territory. Trade happened sometimes, through careful and distant channels, but there was almost no direct contact. Both sides preferred it that way. And now, one ship, alone, unafraid, was flying straight toward the most important planet in the entire empire. "Get me the council," Commander Orr said. "Now." While the officers scrambled to connect the call, more updates came in. The human ship was moving at a steady, unhurried speed. It was not trying to sneak past their defense grid, and it was not trying to fight through it either. It simply flew in a straight line, ignoring every warning signal that the automated defense systems threw at it. 3 defense platforms tried to lock weapons onto the ship as it passed. All 3 locks failed instantly, as if the ship's systems had simply reached out and turned them off. No shots were fired. No alarms from the platforms themselves. It was as if the ship had said, without a single word, that it was not interested in a fight, and that resistance would be pointless. That silence was more frightening than any attack could have been. "Sir," said a younger officer named Mira Kess, standing near the tactical display, "our long-range scanners can't get a clear reading of what's inside the ship. It's using some kind of shielding we don't have data on." "Weapons status?" Orr asked. "Unknown, sir. The outer hull doesn't show any active weapon ports, but that doesn't mean anything with human ships. We learned that the hard way in the war." Orr rubbed his face with both of his long, 3-fingered hands. He had been a young officer during the last war. He had seen what human weapons could do to a Caldrian battlecruiser at close range. He still had nightmares about it sometimes, waking up in the dark with the sound of alarms ringing in his ears, even though there was no alarm at all, just memory. "Options," he said. "Give me options." Mira spoke first. "We could scramble the home fleet. We have 40 ships in dock right now, ready within the hour. And if that one ship decides 40 is not enough of a reason to stop what it's doing," Orr said quietly, "how many of our people die tonight because we panicked?" No one answered him. They all knew the numbers from the war. They all knew that human ships, especially Sable-class ones, did not need 40 enemy ships to be dangerous. 40 enemy ships might just make the human ship angry. Get me a channel to the ship, Orr said finally. We are not shooting first. We are not scrambling the fleet, not yet. First we talk. It took several attempts before the channel connected. When it did, there was no picture, only sound. A calm human voice, speaking the Caldrian trade language, with a strange accent, but perfect grammar. This is Captain Elena Voss of the Terran Survey and Contact Vessel Quiet Reason, the voice said. We are aware that our presence has caused alarm. We assure you that we have no hostile intentions. We request permission to proceed to Vol Prime, for the purpose of diplomatic contact. The entire command center stared at the speaker, as if it might explain itself further. It did not. Commander Orr leaned toward the microphone. Captain Voss, this is Fleet Commander Dasik Orr, of the Caldrian Home Defense Fleet. You have entered our capital system without authorization or advance notice. This is considered a serious violation of interstellar law. I must ask you to hold your position immediately while we consult with our government. There was a pause. Then the voice came back, still calm, still polite. Commander, I understand your concern, and I apologize for the lack of notice. However, my orders are time-sensitive. I will continue toward Vol Prime at my current speed, which is well below what my ship is capable of, specifically, so that your defense systems have time to observe that I mean no harm. I will not deviate from my course, and I will not increase my speed unless provoked. I hope this shows good faith. That is not how this works, Orr said, his voice rising slightly. You cannot simply announce that you are ignoring our authority and call it good faith. I understand your position, Commander, the voice said. I truly do. But my mission comes from the highest levels of Earth's government, and I do not have the authority to turn back. If your government wishes to stop me by force, I will not resist. I have configured my ship's defenses to passive mode, but I do not believe that stopping me by force is what your government wants, and I do not think it is what you want either. Orr closed his eyes for a moment. The ship was right, and that was the worst part. The call to the Grand Council connected soon after. 5 council members appeared on screen, their faces still puffy from interrupted sleep, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Chief Counselor Yara Bell, the oldest and most respected member of the council, spoke first. Commander Orr, she said, explain to me why I am looking at reports of a human warship inside our home system. Orr explained everything as quickly and clearly as he could. The council listened in silence, their expressions growing more serious with every sentence. When he finished, there was a long pause before anyone spoke. Do we attack it? Asked Councillor Threx, a younger and more aggressive member of the council, known for pushing for stronger military spending since the end of the war. With what? Replied Councillor Yara Bell sharply. Our entire home fleet against one ship that could, according to our own intelligence reports, defeat our entire home fleet without much difficulty? Have you forgotten what happened at the Battle of Corin Station? Threx's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. The human captain says her orders come from the highest levels of Earth's government, Orr said. She says it is a diplomatic mission. Diplomatic missions do not usually involve a single warship flying straight through our defense grid at capital speed, said another counselor, an older female named Dessa Thorne, who oversaw foreign relations. If they wanted to speak with us, there are proper channels. We have had limited but functioning contact with human diplomatic offices for years. Perhaps that is exactly why they didn't use those channels, Yara Bell said slowly. Perhaps this is meant to be seen. Perhaps they want every one of our citizens, every one of our military officers, every one of us on this council, to understand something, without needing to say it in words. The room went quiet again. What is the human's reputation built on, in the end? Yara Bell continued. Not simply military strength. We have other neighbors with strong militaries, and we do not fear them the way we fear the humans. It is something else. It is their willingness to use terrible force, but only when they believe it is truly necessary, and their strange, unsettling calm when they choose not to use it. This ship is not attacking us. It could be attacking us right now, and it is not. That is a message all on its own. Threx frowned. So we simply let them fly wherever they please in our territory? That sets a terrible example. Every enemy watching us will see that Caldria bends the moment a human ship shows up. No, Yara Bell said. We do not bend. We observe, and we respond with control. not fear. Commander Orr, do not attack the ship. Do not attempt to force it down. Allow it to proceed toward Vol Prime, but keep close escort, and be ready for anything. I want eyes on that ship every second, until we understand what they actually want. Orr saluted, though the gesture felt strange given the situation, and gave the order. 6 Caldrian escort ships were sent to fly alongside the human vessel, close enough to be a visible presence, far enough to avoid a sudden accident triggering something no one wanted. The human ship did not react to the escorts at all. It simply continued on its path, steady and slow, as if the 6 armed warships surrounding it were nothing more than a light rain outside a window. Word began to spread through Vol Prime even before the sun rose. News networks picked up the story within the hour, and by morning, half the planet was awake and watching the sky. Citizens gathered on balconies and rooftops, staring upward with a strange mixture of fear and fascination, hoping to catch a glimpse of the strange ship that everyone was talking about. In the lower districts of the capital city, an old veteran named Cor Vantis sat outside a small shop, listening to the news on an old radio. He had fought in the last war. He had lost his left arm, and most of his hearing in one ear, during a battle against a human strike force. When he heard that a human ship was approaching the capital, he did not feel excitement or curiosity like so many of the young people around him. He felt a cold, familiar fear settle into his chest, the same fear he remembered from 23 years ago, right before the sky had turned to fire. "They're really doing this," he muttered to himself, gripping his cane a little tighter, "flying right into our home like it's nothing." A young shopkeeper nearby laughed nervously. "Maybe it's peaceful. Maybe they just want to talk." Cor Vantis shook his head slowly. "Doesn't matter what they want. What matters is that not one soul in our entire fleet is brave enough to stop them. That tells you everything you need to know about who really holds the power in this galaxy." Back in the command center, Fleet Commander Orr watched the human ship's steady progress on the main display, his hands folded tightly behind his back. Every part of his training told him this was wrong, that an unauthorized foreign warship should never be allowed this close to the capital, that every rule of defense and sovereignty was being broken in front of his eyes. And yet he did nothing to stop it, because stopping it might mean the end of everything he was trying to protect. "Commander," Mirakes said quietly, coming to stand beside him, "do you think it's really just one captain and one ship, or is there something bigger behind this?" Orr did not answer right away. He watched the small dot on the screen, moving steadily closer to the beating heart of his empire, calm and unstoppable, like a single drop of water that everyone somehow knew would eventually become a flood. "I don't know," he said finally, "but I think we're about to find out." The human ship, the Quiet Reason, continued its slow and steady path toward Vol Prime, ignoring every silent scream of fear that rippled through the empire around it. Inside the ship, Captain Elena Voss sat in her command chair, watching the same approach on her own screens, her face calm, her mind focused entirely on the mission ahead. She had been given a task that very few people in Earth's government trusted anyone else to carry out. She was flying not as a soldier looking for a fight, but as a messenger, carrying words that could either prevent a great disaster, or, if handled badly, start a war far worse than the one that had ended over 2 decades ago. She did not know exactly how the Caldrian Empire would react once she reached the surface. She only knew that she could not fail, and that the fear she was causing simply by existing in this system was, in its own strange way, part of the reason she had been chosen for this mission in the first place. Behind her, on the wall of her small command room, hung a single photograph of a human colony world called New Meridian, a peaceful farming settlement on the edge of human territory. It was the reason she was here. It was the reason none of this could wait for slow, careful diplomacy. As the capital city of Vol Prime came into view on her main screen, glowing and beautiful against the darkness of space, Elena Voss took a slow breath and prepared herself for what was about to come. Whatever happened next, there would be no turning back. The Quiet Reason entered high orbit above Vol Prime, just as the sun rose fully over the capital city. From the ground, citizens could see it clearly now, a long, dark shape against the pale morning sky, moving so smoothly that it barely looked real. It did not look like a warship built for destruction. It looked almost peaceful, gliding above them like a silent bird, and that peacefulness frightened people even more than a display of weapons would have. Inside the orbital command center, Fleet Commander Dasik Orr stood with his arms crossed, watching 6 of his own escort ships form a loose ring around the human vessel. It was mostly for show. Everyone in that room understood that if the Quiet Reason wanted to fight its way free, 6 ships would not be nearly enough to stop it. But appearances mattered, especially with the entire planet watching. "The human captain is requesting landing clearance," said Trell Voss, still at his station, though he had not slept in over 12 hours and his eyes were red from exhaustion. "She wants to land at the central diplomatic platform, right in the middle of the government district." Orr let out a slow breath. The central diplomatic platform sat less than 2 kilometers from the Grand Council chambers, the very heart of Caldrian political power. Allowing a human warship to land there was almost unthinkable, and yet refusing felt just as dangerous, maybe more so. "Patch me through to the council," Orr said. The Grand Council was already gathered, all 5 members sitting around their circular table, screens showing live footage of the ship above them. Chief Counselor Yara Bell looked tired, but composed, her long fingers folded together in front of her. "They want to land at the central platform," Orr reported. "Of course they do," muttered Counselor Threx. "Why request something reasonable when you can demand something that makes every one of us look powerless?" "It is not a demand meant to humiliate us," Yara Bell said calmly. "It is a demand meant to be understood clearly. They are telling us this is important enough that they will not accept being pushed to the edges. If they wanted a quiet, hidden meeting somewhere far from public eyes, they could have asked for that instead. They did not. So, we simply give them what they want?" Threx snapped. "First they fly into our home system uninvited, and now we let them land in the middle of our capital like honored guests?" "We give them what they want," Yara Bell said, "because refusing costs us more than allowing it. Think, Threx. If we refuse, what happens? Either they turn back peacefully, which seems very unlikely given how far they have already come, or they insist, and then we are forced to either use violence against a single ship that likely outclasses our entire home fleet, or back down anyway after a public standoff that the entire empire will watch unfold. Either path makes us look weaker than simply allowing the landing on our own terms, with dignity." There was a long silence around the table. Finally, Counselor Dessa Thorne, who oversaw foreign relations, spoke up. "I agree with the Chief Counselor," she said. "But I want heavy security around that platform. If this is truly a diplomatic mission, they will understand our need for caution. If it is something else, we need to be ready." "Agreed," Yara Bell said. "Commander Orr, grant landing clearance, but surround the platform with our best ground forces. No aggressive positioning, nothing they could mistake as an attack, but a clear and visible show of order and control." Orr nodded, and relayed the orders immediately. Within the hour, the central diplomatic platform, usually a quiet and mostly empty landing area, reserved for rare and important guests, was transformed. Hundreds of Caldrian soldiers in full armor lined the perimeter, standing at careful, disciplined attention. News cameras from every major network hovered nearby, capturing every second of what was quickly becoming the most watched event in the Empire's recent history. The Quiet Reason descended slowly, its engines making almost no sound at all, which many of the watching soldiers found strange and unsettling. Caldrian ships were loud when they landed, their engines roaring and shaking the ground. This human ship settled onto the platform with barely a whisper, as if it did not need to announce its own arrival with noise, because everyone was already watching anyway. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The ship simply sat there, its hull gleaming faintly in the morning light, its exact size now visible to everyone watching. It was smaller than most people had imagined from the reports, barely larger than a Caldrian escort cruiser, and yet everyone in that crowd of soldiers knew exactly what that small ship was capable of. Then, slowly, a ramp extended from the ship's side, lowering gently to the platform below. A single figure stepped out. She was human, tall for her species but still shorter than most Caldrians, with short dark hair and a plain gray uniform that carried no obvious markings of rank beyond a small insignia on her chest. She was not wearing armor. She was not carrying any weapon that anyone could see. She simply walked down the ramp with calm, even steps, her hands relaxed at her sides, and stopped at the bottom, looking out at the wall of armed soldiers surrounding her. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Captain Elena Voss smiled, a small, polite smile, and spoke in clear Caldrian trade language, her voice carrying easily across the quiet platform. "Thank you for allowing me to land," she said. "I know this is not how first meetings are usually supposed to happen. I apologize for any fear or confusion I have caused. I am here to speak with your government, and only your government. I have no intention of causing harm to anyone here." Fleet Commander Orr stepped forward from among the assembled officers, his posture stiff and formal. "Captain Voss, I am Fleet Commander Dasik Orr. On behalf of the Caldrian Empire, I am here to escort you to the Grand Council chambers, where your request for diplomatic contact will be heard." "Thank you, Commander," Elena said, inclining her head slightly. "Lead the way." As they began walking, flanked on all sides by armed soldiers who watched her every movement with careful, tense eyes, Elena Voss looked around at the city surrounding the platform. Tall silver buildings rose up around them, decorated with strange, beautiful patterns that seemed to shift slightly in the light. Caldrian citizens crowded at windows and rooftops in the distance, straining to catch a glimpse of the human who had dared to fly straight into their capital. She had studied images of Vol Prime before this mission, but seeing it in person was different. It was, she had to admit to herself, a beautiful city. "You seem very calm, Captain," Orr said quietly as they walked, mostly to fill the tense silence between them. "Considering you are surrounded by several hundred armed soldiers, who have very good reason to distrust you." "Would it help if I appeared nervous, Commander?" Elena asked, a faint hint of dry humor in her voice. "It might make you seem less unsettling," Orr admitted. Elena's expression softened slightly. "I understand the fear I've caused, truly. I remember the reports from the last war, same as your people do. I know what humanity did during that conflict, and I understand why the sight of a single Sable-class ship makes your soldiers grip their weapons a little tighter. But Commander, I promise you, I am not here to start another war. I am here because I am trying very hard to prevent one." Orr glanced sideways at her, his expression unreadable. "Prevent one from whom? Us?" "No," Elena said, her voice suddenly quieter, more serious. "Not from you." Before Orr could ask what she meant, they arrived at the entrance to the Grand Council chambers, an enormous domed building at the very center of the capital, its walls decorated with the history of the Caldrian Empire carved into shining stone. Guards at the entrance stepped aside as Orr led Elena inside, down a long hallway lined with the portraits of past leaders, until they reached a set of massive doors that opened slowly to reveal the council chamber itself. Inside, the 5 members of the Grand Council sat at their circular table, waiting. Reporters and select officials filled the observation seats around the edges of the room, all of them silent, all of them watching closely. Chief Counselor Yara Bell rose slightly from her seat as Elena entered, her ancient eyes studying the human captain carefully. "Captain Voss," she said. "Welcome to Vol Prime. I am Chief Counselor Yara Bell. Please, sit." A single chair had been placed at the center of the room, facing the council's table. Elena walked to it calmly and sat down, her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. "Thank you for receiving me, Chief Counselor," she said. "You have caused quite a disturbance, Captain," Yara Bell said, though her tone was not unkind, simply direct. "An unannounced human warship entering our home system in the middle of the night is not something we take lightly, especially given our history together." "I understand, and I apologize sincerely for the method of my arrival," Elena said. "I would not have chosen it if I had believed there was a faster, equally reliable way to guarantee this meeting happened." "Explain," Counselor Threx said sharply, leaning forward. "Explain why this meeting was so urgent that you needed to frighten an entire empire to arrange it." Elena took a slow breath, glancing around the room at the 5 faces watching her, at the reporters recording every word, at the soldiers standing guard along the walls. "3 months ago," she began, "a human research and survey team discovered something in the unclaimed space between our 2 territories, a region neither of our governments has ever fully explored, mostly because of the dangers involved. Do you know the region I am referring to?" Counselor Dessa Thorne's expression shifted slightly. "The hollow expanse." "Yes," Elena said, "the hollow expanse. My government survey team was investigating unusual gravitational readings there when they found something none of us expected. An ancient structure, buried deep within an asteroid field, far older than either human or Caldrian civilization. And Chief Counselor, it was not empty. The room went very quiet. What did you find? Yara Bell asked, her voice careful now, all traces of formality gone from her tone. Something that is still active, Elena said. Something that has been sending out a signal, slowly, for what our scientists estimate to be thousands of years. A signal that, 3 months ago, suddenly changed pattern. It began counting down. Counting down to what? Threx demanded. We don't know exactly, Elena admitted. But our best scientists, along with a small independent team of xenoarchaeologists, believe it may be some kind of automated defense or awakening system, left behind by a civilization that no longer exists. If they are right, whatever it wakes may not care whether it is human or Caldrian standing nearby when it does. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. And you believe this concerns us because... Dessa Thorne began. Because the hollow expanse sits almost exactly between our two territories, Elena said. Whatever wakes there, whatever this signal is counting down toward, will not respect borders. It will not care about old wars or old peace treaties. If this is dangerous, Chief Counselor, it will be dangerous to both of our peoples equally, and we will only have a chance to survive it if we face it together. Yara Bell sat back slowly in her chair, her expression grave. And this is why you came the way you did. Not through slow diplomatic channels, not through careful negotiation over months. You came directly, dramatically, because you needed our full attention immediately. Yes, Elena said simply. I am sorry for the fear I caused. But I did not believe a formal request through normal channels would move quickly enough, or be taken seriously enough, given how little trust exists between our governments right now. I needed every person in this empire, from your council down to the soldiers standing along these walls, to understand that this is not a minor matter. It could not wait for slow committees and careful wording. Councillor Threx, who had been the most hostile since Elena's arrival, was quiet now, his earlier anger replaced by something closer to genuine concern. How long, he asked, until the countdown reaches its end? Elena's expression grew even more serious. According to our best estimates, Counselor, we have less than 4 months. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before it, heavier than the fear of the ship's arrival, heavier than the tension of the walk through the capital streets. Every person in that room understood, in that moment, that whatever came next would shape the future of both their peoples, whether they were ready for it or not. Yara Bell finally broke the silence, her voice steady despite the weight of what she had just heard. Then, Captain Voss, she said, I believe we have a great deal to discuss. The meeting that followed lasted nearly 6 hours. Servants brought food and drink that neither side touched much, too consumed by the flow of questions and answers passing between the human captain and the Caldrian council. Elena Voss answered every question as honestly as she could, sharing data files, sensor readings, and scientific reports from the survey team that had first discovered the ancient structure in the hollow expanse. The council's own scientists were brought in partway through the meeting, a team of 5 Caldrian researchers who studied the human data with growing alarm on their faces. One of them, an older researcher named Dr. Fessa Wren, spoke up after nearly an hour of careful review. This matches something, she said quietly, almost to herself. There have been old legends, very old ones, about a civilization called the Vantiri. Most historians dismiss them as myth, nothing more than ancient folk tales. But the structure you describe, the shape, the materials, the strange energy signature. It fits certain old descriptions surprisingly well. Do the legends say what the Vantiri built these structures for? Elena asked. Dr. Wren hesitated. The legends say the Vantiri disappeared very suddenly, all at once, across their entire territory. No war was recorded, no plague. They were simply gone. And the stories say that before they vanished, they built machines, guardians, some called them, left behind to watch over something important, or to protect something dangerous, depending on which version of the story you believe. The room fell quiet again. If this structure is truly Vantiri, Yara Bell said slowly, and if it is beginning to awaken after countless thousands of years, we may be facing something far beyond either of our understanding. That is exactly why my government believed this could not wait, Elena said. We are not equipped to face this alone, and I do not believe your empire is either. Counselor Threx, who had spent most of the meeting in tense silence, finally spoke again. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? A joint military expedition? An alliance? Our people have not stood beside humans as allies since before the war, and even before that, cooperation was limited and cautious. I am proposing exactly that, Elena said. A joint expedition. Human and Caldrian scientists, engineers, and yes, military escort, traveling together to the hollow expanse to study the structure before the countdown reaches 0. If we are lucky, we may be able to understand what it is and prevent whatever is about to happen. If we cannot prevent it, at the very least we will not be facing it blind. And if this Vantiri Guardian, if that is truly what it is, decides to attack the moment it wakes, Threx pressed. What then? Elena's expression grew solemn. Then, Counselor, we will need every ship, every soldier, every mind that both our peoples can offer, working together, not against each other. I will not pretend to you that this is without danger, but I believe the danger of doing nothing, of each of us investigating separately, distrustfully, without sharing what we learn, is far greater. The council members exchanged long looks with one another. Finally, Yarabel spoke. We will need time to properly consider a proposal of this size, Captain. This affects the security and future of our entire empire. It is not a decision 5 people can make in a single afternoon, however urgent the timeline. I understand, Elena said, but Chief Counselor, I would ask you to consider the timeline carefully. 4 months seems like a long time, until you remember how much work must be done. Ships must be built or repurposed. Scientists must be selected and briefed. Supplies must be gathered. If we wait even a month simply deciding whether to act, we lose a quarter of the time we have left. Yarabel nodded slowly. You make a fair point. I will call for an emergency session of the full council within 2 days. Not simply the 5 of us who oversee daily matters, but every representative from every major world in our empire. This decision is too large for a small group alone. Thank you, Chief Counselor, Elena said. I understand this is a difficult thing to consider, especially given our history. I do not ask you to trust humanity blindly. I only ask that you consider the evidence honestly. As the meeting came to a close, Elena was escorted back toward guest quarters that had been hastily prepared for her within the council building itself, a decision that had caused significant debate among the security staff. Some had argued she should remain aboard her own ship, kept at a careful distance. Others had argued that keeping her isolated would send the wrong message, especially given what she had just revealed. In the end, Yarabel had made the final call. If we truly wish to consider working alongside humanity, she had said, we cannot begin by treating their representative as a prisoner. Let her stay within our walls. Let her see that we are not simply hiding behind fear. That night, as the capital city settled into an uneasy quiet, word of the meeting began to leak into public knowledge, despite the council's efforts to keep the full details contained until the emergency session. Rumors spread quickly through Vol Prime, growing more exaggerated with each retelling. Some said the humans had discovered a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems. Others said an alien invasion force far more powerful than either humans or Caldrians was already on its way. The truth, though serious enough on its own, became tangled with fear and speculation, until almost no one outside the council chamber knew what to believe. Fleet Commander Orr, still exhausted from nearly 2 full days without proper sleep, found himself standing guard duty near the human captain's guest quarters that night, partly out of genuine concern for security, and partly, he admitted to himself, out of simple curiosity. Around midnight, the door to Elena's quarters slid open, and she stepped out into the hallway, apparently unable to sleep either. She seemed surprised to see him standing there. Commander Orr, she said. I didn't expect anyone to still be posted here this late. Someone has to be, Orr said simply. Couldn't sleep, Captain. No, Elena admitted, leaning against the wall near the doorway. Too much on my mind, I suppose. It's strange. I spent weeks preparing for the worst possible reactions to today. Arguments, threats, maybe even an attempt to detain me by force. I didn't fully prepare myself for simply being listened to. Orr studied her for a moment. You expected us to attack you? I considered it a real possibility, Elena said honestly. Given our history, given how frightening my ship's arrival must have looked, I thought there was a strong chance your council would see me as a threat first, and a messenger second. There were some who argued exactly that, or admitted. Councillor Threx wanted to consider detaining you the moment you landed, before we even heard what you had to say. But you didn't, Elena said. It wasn't quite a question. Chief Councillor Yara Bell overruled him, or said, "She's not someone who acts out of fear easily. Not many people are left in our government who remember the war as clearly as she does. She lost her only son during the Battle of Corin Station." Elena's expression softened with genuine sorrow. "I'm sorry, I didn't know that." "She doesn't speak of it often," Orr said, "but I think it's part of why she's so careful now. She's seen what fear and hatred, unchecked, can turn into. She doesn't want to repeat that mistake, even against the very people who caused her that pain in the first place." They stood together in silence for a moment, the quiet hallway lit softly by pale nighttime lighting. "Can I ask you something, Commander?" Elena said eventually. "Go ahead." "During the war," she said carefully, "what was it like, facing us? I've read the reports from our side, obviously. I know the numbers, the tactics, the outcomes, but I've never heard it described by someone who was actually there." Orr was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant, remembering things he rarely spoke about. "Terrifying," he said finally. "Not just because of the losses, though those were bad enough. It was the way your ships fought. So precise, so controlled. We would send in waves of soldiers, brave soldiers, willing to die for their empire, and your forces would respond with exactly the amount of force needed to stop us. No more, no less. It felt less like fighting an enemy, and more like watching a machine calmly solve a problem it found only mildly difficult." Elena's expression grew troubled. "I'm sorry you experienced that." "I'm not looking for an apology, Captain," Orr said. "I'm simply answering your question honestly. That is what made humanity terrifying to us. Not simply your strength, but your control over that strength. A wild, uncontrolled enemy can be predicted, in a strange way. A calm, controlled one, willing to use exactly as much violence as necessary, and not one drop more, is far harder to understand, and far harder to trust." "That's part of why I came the way I did," Elena said quietly. "Not to threaten you, but because I knew that same reputation would make your government listen, even if it also made them afraid. I didn't want to use that fear as a weapon, Commander. I hope you understand that. But I needed this meeting to happen quickly, and I used the tools I had available to make sure that it did." Orr studied her for a long moment. "I believe you, Captain, for whatever that's worth." "It's worth a great deal, actually," Elena said, offering a small, tired smile. "Thank you." 2 days later, the full emergency session of the Grand Council convened, filling the enormous central chamber with representatives from every major Caldrian world. Dozens of important voices all gathered to hear the same evidence that had been presented to the smaller council 2 days before. Elena stood again, in the center of that great room, repeating her explanation, answering the same difficult questions, this time facing a much larger and much more divided audience. The debate that followed was long and heated. Some representatives argued passionately in favor of the joint expedition, recognizing the shared danger the ancient structure represented. Others argued just as passionately against it, distrustful of human intentions even now, worried that this entire crisis might be some elaborate trick designed to weaken Caldrian defenses or gain access to sensitive territory. Through it all, Elena remained patient, answering every accusation and every fearful question as calmly and honestly as she could, understanding that trust, once broken by war, could not be rebuilt in a single afternoon, no matter how urgent the circumstances. As the sun began to set outside the great chamber windows, casting long golden light across the assembled representatives, Chief Counselor Yara Bell rose to her feet and called for the final vote. The vote was close, closer than Elena had expected, but in the end, the majority of the assembled representatives chose to approve the joint expedition. 211 votes in favor, 189 against. It was not the overwhelming agreement Elena had hoped for, but it was enough. The Caldrian Empire would work alongside humanity to investigate the awakening structure in the hollow expanse. Chief Counselor Yara Bell addressed the chamber once the votes were confirmed, her voice carrying clearly across the enormous room. "This decision will not be an easy one to carry out," she said. "There are many among us, myself included at times, who still carry the pain and the fear of our last war with humanity. That pain does not disappear simply because we have voted to work together now. But I believe, and I hope you will come to believe as well, that facing an unknown and possibly catastrophic danger divided is far more dangerous than facing it together, however uncomfortable that partnership may feel." Not everyone in the chamber was satisfied. Councillor Threx, despite having voted against the proposal, approached Elena after the session ended, his expression still tense and guarded. "The vote has passed, Captain," he said stiffly. "I will not pretend I agree with this decision, but I will not obstruct it either. However, I want it understood clearly. If this joint mission is used by your government for any purpose beyond what you have described to us, if we discover even the smallest sign of deception, the consequences will be severe. And I promise you, on behalf of my government, that our intentions are exactly as I have described. But I also understand that promises alone are not enough after everything our two peoples have been through. I welcome your government's oversight throughout this mission. Full transparency, full access to our data and methods. We have nothing to hide." Threx studied her for a long moment, his suspicion still evident, but something in her steady, direct answer seemed to ease at least a small part of his distrust. He gave a short nod and walked away without another word. Over the following weeks, preparations for the joint expedition moved forward with surprising speed, driven by the urgency of the shrinking timeline. Human and Caldrian engineers worked side by side for the first time in over 2 decades, adapting ships and equipment to accommodate both species' needs. It was not always smooth. Old habits of suspicion lingered. Miscommunications happened often, sometimes from simple differences in language and culture, sometimes from deeper, harder-to-shake distrust built over years of conflict and separation. Fleet Commander Orr was assigned as the lead Caldrian military liaison for the expedition, working closely alongside Elena Voss to coordinate both fleets. The two of them spent long hours together in planning sessions, slowly building a working relationship that, while professional, began to carry genuine mutual respect. "Your engineers keep arguing with mine about power distribution," Orr said one evening, reviewing reports with visible frustration. "Every time we think we've reached an agreement, someone brings up an old design philosophy dispute that has nothing to do with the actual problem." Human and Caldrian engineering traditions developed almost entirely separately, Elena said, looking over the same reports. "It's not surprising there's friction. Honestly, Commander, I'm more encouraged that they're arguing about engineering rather than arguing about the war. That feels like progress, in its own strange way." Orr allowed himself a small, tired laugh. "I suppose it does. Not all of the difficulties during the preparation period were simply disagreements over engineering, however. Roughly 3 weeks into planning, a serious incident occurred that nearly derailed the entire joint mission before it had even truly begun. A small group of Caldrian officers, led by a mid-level officer named Keswick Dorr, had grown increasingly convinced that the entire human proposal was some kind of elaborate deception, a way for humanity to gain intelligence on Caldrian defense systems and fleet capabilities, under the guise of cooperation. Rather than raising these concerns through proper channels, Dorr and a small group of loyal officers began planning something far more dangerous. They intended to seize control of a joint planning session, take Captain Voss hostage, and force a full inspection of the human ship Quiet Reason, believing they would find proof of hidden weapons or spying equipment that would expose the entire mission as a trick. The plan was clumsy and poorly thought through, driven more by fear and old resentment than by careful strategy. During a routine joint briefing held aboard a neutral space station near Vol Prime, Dorr and 4 other officers, all armed, attempted to storm the meeting room where Elena Voss was reviewing mission logistics alongside several human and Caldrian officials. The moment the armed officers burst into the room, shouting demands, the human security escort accompanying Elena reacted immediately. There were only 2 of them present, both unarmed according to the diplomatic agreements that had been established, but what happened next surprised everyone in the room. Rather than any violent confrontation, the 2 human escorts moved with calm, practiced precision, disarming Dorr and his men within seconds using nothing but controlled physical technique. No shots were fired, no one was seriously injured. The entire confrontation, which had seemed for a terrifying moment like it might spiral into disaster, ended in less than 15 seconds, with all 5 armed officers restrained and disarmed on the floor. Elena herself had not moved from her seat throughout the entire event, her expression calm even as chaos briefly erupted around her. "Are you all right, Captain?" one of her escorts asked immediately afterward, checking to make sure she was unharmed. "I'm fine, thank you," Elena said, standing slowly and looking down at the restrained officers with an expression that held more sadness than anger. "Commander Orr, I trust you'll want to speak with these men." Orr, who had rushed into the room moments after the confrontation ended, stared in disbelief at the scene before him, at his own officers restrained on the ground by 2 unarmed humans who hadn't even raised their voices during the entire encounter. "I am deeply sorry, Captain," Orr said, his voice tight with anger and embarrassment. "This will be dealt with severely." "I understand your anger, Commander," Elena said, "but before you decide on punishment, I'd like to speak with Officer Dorr myself, if that's permitted." Orr hesitated, surprised by the request, but eventually nodded. Later that day, in a quiet holding room aboard the station, Elena sat across from Keswick Dorr, who remained silent and sullen, clearly expecting harsh treatment or interrogation. "I'm not here to threaten you, Officer Dorr," Elena said calmly. "I want to understand why you did what you did." Dorr looked up at her, suspicion clear in his eyes. "You already know why. We don't trust you. We don't trust any of this." Too convenient, isn't it? Humanity discovers some ancient threat right as tensions between our peoples have finally started to ease, and suddenly we're expected to open our defenses and share everything with the same people who slaughtered thousands of our soldiers barely 2 decades ago. "I understand that fear," Elena said. "I don't dismiss it. If our positions were reversed, I imagine I might feel the same suspicion." "Then why should I believe a single word you say?" Dorr snapped. "You don't have to believe my words," Elena said simply. "That's exactly why I insisted on full transparency throughout this mission. Every piece of data we've shared, every design specification, every sensor log, has been made fully available to your government scientists and engineers for independent verification. I'm not asking for blind trust, Officer Dorr. I'm asking for the chance to earn trust through actions, over time, the same way any trust between individuals or nations is ever built." Dorr was quiet for a long moment, his anger slowly giving way to something more uncertain. "My brother died at Corin Station," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "I was 12 years old. I still remember my mother's face when the news came." Elena's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss, Officer Dorr. Truly. I won't pretend that grief like that simply disappears because a treaty was signed or a vote was passed. But I hope, in time, you'll come to see that continuing to fight the same war in new ways only guarantees more grief for more families, on both sides." Dorr didn't answer, but something in his expression shifted slightly, the sharp edge of his anger softening just a little. When word of the incident and Elena's handling of it spread through the fleet, and eventually through public news channels, reactions were mixed but largely favorable toward Elena's response. Many citizens, already uneasy about the joint mission, were surprised and somewhat reassured by the restraint shown during the confrontation, by the complete absence of any serious violence, despite armed officers attempting a hostile takeover of the meeting. Chief Counselor Yara Bell, upon hearing the full report, made a decision that surprised many within the council. Rather than harsh punishment, Dorr and the other officers involved were given administrative discipline and mandatory counseling, but were not removed from service entirely, a decision Yara Bell defended in a closed council session. "Punishing fear with cruelty only creates more fear," she said. "These men acted wrongly, dangerously wrongly, and they must understand the seriousness of what they did. But I would rather correct their path than simply cast them aside. We are trying to build something difficult here. We cannot expect every citizen, every soldier, to embrace this change without struggle." As preparations for the joint expedition continued in the following weeks, the incident, while troubling, ultimately became a strange turning point in the growing relationship between the two fleets. Word spread of how the human security escorts had handled the confrontation without violence, how Elena Voss herself had shown compassion rather than anger toward the very officers who had threatened her, Slowly, cautiously, something that almost resembled genuine trust began to take root among the officers and crew members who would soon be traveling together toward the unknown dangers of the hollow expanse. Fleet Commander Orr found himself, more than once during those weeks, reflecting on how strange it was that a crisis capable of destroying everything might also, in some small way, be bringing two old and bitter enemies closer together than any peace treaty ever had. With just under 2 months remaining, before the ancient signal's countdown reached its end, the combined human and Caldrian fleet finally stood ready to depart for the hollow expanse. The combined fleet gathered at the edge of Caldrian territory, on a cold, gray morning, a sight that no one alive had ever expected to see. 40 Caldrian warships, painted in the deep silver and blue colors of the Empire, floated alongside 12 human vessels, including the Quiet Reason itself, their darker hulls a stark contrast against the brighter Caldrian designs. Together, they formed a single fleet, larger and more powerful than either side could have gathered alone, yet still uncertain of what exactly they were preparing to face. Elena Voss stood on the bridge of the Quiet Reason, watching the assembled ships on her main display, while beside her, Fleet Commander Orr, who had been given temporary joint command alongside Elena for this mission, reviewed final preparations. "It's strange, isn't it?" Orr said quietly, "seeing our ships flying together like this. A year ago, I would have called anyone who predicted this moment a fool. A year ago, I might have agreed with them," Elena admitted, "but here we are." The journey to the hollow expanse took 11 days, traveling at a careful, measured pace to keep the fleet together and to allow both sides' scientists continued time to study the incoming sensor data from the ancient structure, data that grew more alarming with each passing day. The countdown signal had begun to change pattern again, roughly a week before their departure, growing faster, more erratic, suggesting that whatever process the ancient device was undergoing was accelerating toward its conclusion. When the fleet finally arrived at the edge of the hollow expanse, the massive asteroid field stretched out before them like a dark, silent ocean, jagged rock formations tumbling slowly through the void, illuminated faintly by the distant light of a dying star, long since drained of most of its warmth. At the very center of the field, sensors confirmed the presence of the ancient structure, buried deep within one particularly massive asteroid, far larger than any of the surrounding rocks. Even from a distance, faint pulses of strange energy could be detected emanating from within it, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. "Sensor readings are still consistent with what your survey team originally reported," said Dr. Fessa Wren, who had joined the expedition as the lead Caldrian scientist, speaking over the comm channel from her position aboard one of the escort ships. "But the energy output has increased nearly 40% since the last data we received before departure." "How long until the countdown reaches zero?" Orr asked. "Based on current acceleration," Dr. Wren said, her voice tense, "our best estimate is now less than 18 hours. The urgency in the command center was immediate and palpable. Plans that had been carefully prepared over the previous weeks were quickly adjusted, teams reorganized, and a joint scientific and engineering team, composed of both human and Caldrian specialists, was rapidly assembled and sent toward the asteroid, in a small shuttlecraft, escorted closely by both fleets. The structure, once the team finally reached it and began careful external scans, proved to be even stranger than anyone had expected. It was massive, far larger than initial estimates had suggested, extending deep into the asteroid's core, built from a dark, smooth material that neither human nor Caldrian scanning equipment could fully identify. Strange symbols, worn but still faintly visible, covered portions of its outer surface, matching almost exactly the ancient Vantiri markings that Dr. Wren had described from old Caldrian legends. "This is definitely Vantiri," Dr. Wren said, her voice filled with a mixture of scientific excitement and deep unease as she studied the readings coming back from the shuttle team. "But I don't understand the purpose. The design doesn't match anything resembling a weapon. If anything, the internal energy patterns suggest something closer to containment." "Containment of what?" Elena asked. "I don't know yet," Dr. Wren admitted. As the hours ticked down, the joint team worked desperately to understand the structure before the countdown reached its end, running every scan and analysis they could manage, without risking triggering something unknown by attempting to physically breach the ancient device. Both human and Caldrian scientists set aside old habits of working separately, sharing data and theories freely, driven by the shared urgency of the ticking clock above them. With just under 3 hours remaining before the countdown was projected to reach zero, a young human scientist named Dr. Marcus Webb, working alongside a Caldrian counterpart, finally made a breakthrough. "I think I understand it now," he said, his voice shaking slightly, with a mixture of excitement and fear, as he reviewed the data on his screen. "This isn't a weapon, and it isn't a guardian meant to attack anyone who gets close. It's a containment field, exactly like Dr. Wren suspected. Something was sealed inside this structure by the Vantiri, thousands of years ago, and this device has been maintaining that seal ever since, slowly running out of power." "Running out of power?" Orr asked, alarmed. "You mean the countdown isn't leading toward an attack, it's leading toward a failure?" "Exactly," Dr. Webb said. "The Vantiri built this to last, but nothing lasts forever. Whatever power source originally sustained this containment field has been slowly failing for a very, very long time. The recent acceleration in the signal isn't a weapon preparing to launch. It's a failing system, desperately trying to compensate for its own collapse." "What happens when it fails completely?" Elena asked, her voice tight with concern. Dr. Webb hesitated before answering. "I don't know for certain. But, based on the energy patterns we're seeing, whatever is contained inside this structure carries an enormous amount of stored power, energy that has been building and building for thousands of years, with nowhere to release. If the containment fails suddenly and completely, the resulting release could be catastrophic, possibly capable of destroying this entire asteroid field, along with anything nearby. Including," Elena realized with a cold chill, "the entire combined fleet currently gathered at the edge of the expanse." "Can it be stopped?" Orr asked urgently. "Can the containment be repaired, or reinforced somehow?" "Maybe," Dr. Webb said, though his voice carried real uncertainty. "If we can find a way to supply additional power to the failing system, even temporarily, it might be enough to stabilize the containment field long enough for a more permanent solution to be developed later. But we would need to interface directly with the ancient device's power systems, and we have no way of knowing exactly how it works, or whether attempting to interface with it might cause it to fail even faster." Time was running out. With less than 2 hours remaining, Elena, Orr, Dr. Webb, and Dr. Wren gathered aboard the shuttlecraft, now positioned as close to the structure as safety allowed, to make a final, difficult decision. "We don't have time for a perfect solution," Elena said finally. "We have time for our best attempt, and nothing more." "Agreed," Orr said. "Dr. Webb, Dr. Wren, can your combined teams attempt the power interface safely?" "Safely is a strong word, Commander," Dr. Wren said grimly, "but we can attempt it. We'll need a small team to physically approach the structure and establish a direct connection using equipment from both our ships. It's risky. If we misjudge the ancient technology, we could trigger complete failure ourselves, rather than preventing it." "Then we proceed carefully," Elena said. "But we proceed." A small joint team, composed of 2 human engineers and 2 Caldrian engineers, along with Dr. Webb and Dr. Wren overseeing remotely, made their way to the structure's surface in heavy environmental suits, carrying specialized equipment cobbled together from both human and Caldrian technology over the previous frantic hour. The next 90 minutes passed in tense, careful silence as the team worked, guided by constant analysis from both scientists, adjusting their approach moment by moment as they slowly, cautiously, began to establish a connection with the ancient device's failing power systems. Twice, the connection attempt caused alarming spikes in the structure's energy readings, forcing the team to pull back and reassess before trying again with careful adjustments. With less than 20 minutes remaining before the projected failure point, the team finally succeeded in establishing a stable connection, channeling auxiliary power from both a human support ship and a Caldrian escort vessel directly into the ancient containment system. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing seemed to change. The countdown continued, the energy readings continued to climb, and everyone watching from the command centers of both fleets held their breath, uncertain if their efforts had made any difference at all. Then, slowly, the readings began to stabilize. "It's working," Dr. Webb said, his voice filled with disbelief and relief. The additional power is compensating for the failing systems. The containment field is stabilizing. A cheer went up across the joint command channel, human and Caldrian voices mixing together in shared relief and celebration, a sound that would have seemed impossible only months before. The structure's countdown, once it became clear the immediate crisis had been averted, slowed dramatically, the ancient device settling into what appeared to be a stable, if still fragile, equilibrium. It would need further study, further repair, and likely a far more permanent solution developed over the coming months and years, but for now, the immediate danger had passed. In the days that followed, as the joint fleet began the process of establishing a more permanent research and monitoring station near the structure, Elena Voss and Fleet Commander Orr stood together on the observation deck of the Quiet Reason, watching the strange, ancient device glow faintly in the darkness outside, its energy patterns now calm and steady. "We did it," Orr said quietly. "Together." "We did," Elena agreed. "I won't pretend this solves everything between our peoples, Commander. There's still a great deal of history, a great deal of pain, that won't simply disappear because we work together during a crisis." "No," Orr agreed, "but it's a start. A real one, I think. Not simply words on a treaty." Back on Vol Prime, news of the successful joint mission spread quickly, met with a mixture of relief, pride, and cautious hope across the Empire. Chief Counselor Yara Bell addressed the full council once again, her voice carrying a quiet strength as she spoke of what had been accomplished and what still lay ahead. "We faced something none of us fully understood," she said, "something that threatened all of us equally, regardless of the borders we have drawn between our peoples. And in facing it together, we discovered something perhaps even more valuable than the crisis we averted. We discovered that cooperation, however difficult, however uncomfortable, is possible, even between old and bitter enemies." Far from the capital, in the quiet streets of Vol Prime, an old veteran named Cor Vantis sat outside his small shop once again, listening to the news on his old radio, the same radio that had once carried the frightening news of a single dangerous human ship entering the alien capital. This time, as he listened to the reports of what that ship and the mission it had begun had ultimately accomplished, the old fear in his chest eased just slightly, replaced by something he had not expected to feel again after everything the war had taken from him. A small, cautious hope for what might still come. The Quiet Reason, along with the rest of the combined fleet, would remain near the hollow expanse for several more weeks, ensuring the ancient structure remained stable while permanent solutions were developed. But its arrival, so sudden and so frightening, would be remembered for years to come, not as the beginning of a new war, but as the strange, unexpected first step towards something neither humanity nor the Caldrian Empire had truly believed possible. A future built, not on fear alone, but on the fragile, hard-won beginning of trust.